an indictment is really not that big a deal. Basically, a group of, is it attorneys or people? A group basically says, we think there's enough evidence that this could go to court.
Yeah.
But that group is not bipartisan. That group is not selected through a process like a jury.
It's a grand jury. It's a grand jury.
How does it work?
Yeah. So prosecutors, there are lots of things that people do that could be taken to court, right? But prosecutors there's only so much time and enough and money and whatever. So they go through this process where they get a grand jury. So it's a jury of, your peers. They go through the whole jury process, but it's only the prosecution showing the evidence. So the prosecution is showing evidence to this group of, this jury of your peers, saying, this is the evidence we have. Here are some witnesses that we want you to see, that we want you to hear from. And then you guys decide, just a simple majority, right? For a criminal case, you have to have, everybody has to agree. But for an indictment, you just have to have a simple majority, right? 51%.
Yeah.
Is there enough evidence to bring a formal charge?
So with an indictment, you have one side of the story, the prosecution.
Yep.
A simple majority of a grand jury.
Yeah.
And is the grand jury picked? Well, it's not picked by both sides. Like a normal jury is picked by both, like the defensive counsel and the prosecution both have a say in who makes the jury.
Yeah, there's a jury selection process, but yeah.
It's just selected by the prosecution.
Yeah.
So it's prosecution driven, one-sided evidence. They pick who votes, and then a simple majority raises their hand and says, yes, we think there's enough evidence. And then boom, you have an indictment.
Yeah, and then that's the indictment. And then once the indictment is made public, then the all of the evidence that the prosecution has is then shown to the defense. And then at that point, there's this, so an indictment is a step, right? So it makes headlines. But after that, once the defense sees all the evidence, the first thing they try to do is have the case dismissed.
Yeah.
Right? Say, oh, this is malarkey.
And we've seen that. We've seen that dozens of times.
And so, the very next step could be a judge dismisses the case.
Yeah.
Or the very next step could be the judge doesn't dismiss the case, but it's months and months of attorney wrangling.
Yeah.
Fighting over procedure and fighting over what evidence is allowed, because just because there's evidence doesn't mean it's allowed, right?
So with the 3 Trump indictments that we've seen, what that means is a one-sided conversation was built.
Yeah.
A one-sided of evidence was shown to a biased grand jury who then said, yes, we think that there's enough evidence here. So boom, there's an indictment. Now the court dates that apply have all been months in advance. The earliest court date I think is December.
Yeah.
I think the second court date is March. And even then, those court dates aren't firm because the time between now and then is when deliberations happen, attorney wrangling.
There's all this administrative and procedural stuff that happens before anything ever gets to court.
So cases could be dismissed in this period of time. Defenses could build a defense that makes a judge not even want to take it to court. Like all sorts of things. The prosecution can withdraw their case if they want to too, right? All of these things could happen between now and the court dates themselves.
Yeah.
So
it's no smoking gun.
It's no smoking gun.
It's not a conviction.
It's not the end. It's important because no former president has ever had it happen before.
Right.
But Trump is not the first president to break the law.
Yeah.
And even then, he hasn't been proven. It hasn't been proven that he broke the law. In the impeachment process, which is such an interesting process, and I would love for you to get your thoughts on it. The impeachment process is done outside of the judicial branch. So the entire impeachment process is a kind of like a court hearing, but with no legal professionals.
Congressional peers.
So it's not. So if they impeach you, it doesn't really mean that you broke the law either. It means that they're accusing you of something, and that something could or couldn't be proven, but no legal professionals involved.
It's not. Yeah, it's not. It's not. You can't compare it to a court case that's brought before a judge.
So you said Nixon was impeached? No, Nixon's never went to impeachment. Is that right?
He went through an impeachment process, but I don't believe he was impeached. What's interesting is that previous to this, and it could still happen with Trump too. So like Bill Clinton, right? Lied under oath.
Yep.
Right, is charged with obstruction of justice. There was so he went through impeachment proceedings, and then I believe there was a case brought outside after he was president. So obstruction of justice seems to be this very common theme.
Because that was Johnson, too, was obstruction of justice.
Yeah, and Clinton and Nixon and
Trump.
And Trump.
Obstruction of justice.
Obstruction of justice.
So they did something specific, but the legal terminology for what they did was obstruction of justice, which to
Right.
me sounds like you are obstructing the judicial branch from doing their job. So it violates checks and balances. Is that correct? They're obstructing the judicial branch?
They're obstructing. So interestingly enough, if it's the Department of Justice, the Department of Justice is actually the executive branch.
The Department of Justice is the executive branch.
Right.
Not the judicial branch.
Correct. Yeah, the judicial branch is just the courts, the judges. But the attorneys that work for the federal government are all the executive branch.
So when a president...
Who is part of the executive branch.
So the president, who's part of the executive branch and is the chief executive, obstructs justice. They're obstructing the ability for the Department of Justice, which is under the executive branch,
to do its job. Yeah. And so
and none of it falls under the rubric of the Department of Justice. It goes to the legislative branch to decide in an impeachment.
in an impeachment, yes. But in a criminal case, right, when they're bringing federal charges, that's Department of Justice.
Yeah.
And so Bill Clinton's case, he settled. He
settled?
Yeah, he had a case brought against him in the...
Yep. Monica Lewinsky?
And her name...
Oh, there was an and.
Yes,
nobody ever remembers that there was an and.
Yeah, I can picture her face now, but I'm losing her name. But he settled that case. He agreed to lose his law practicing license because he was an attorney.
Talk about lasting impressions, because people still think very favorably about Bill Clinton.
I know. Well, I don't have, I have my own opinions about Bill Clinton. They're not all unfavorable, but the moment he lied under oath, I thought, what a giant dumbass.
That's what I thought too. We were young when that happened, but it's lasting
Even
impressions
then,
for us.
Yeah.
Where there are people who, Bill Clinton still sits very close to the front row every time a new president's sworn in.
Yeah.
He is still seen. The Clinton family name is still a very positive name in circles.
Yeah.
Completely forgetting the fact that when he was president, he lied under oath.
Yeah.
He was an attorney, sworn to defend and support the Constitution. So,
yeah. But the thing there's, even with Trump's indictments, it's not necessarily going to, it may not go to court. It may be dismissed. It may go to court. He may be convicted of something. He may have to pay a fine. He may have to go to jail. He may make a plea deal.
Yeah.
Any of those things can happen.
If you like this short clip, make sure you click here to see the next clip, or here to see the full podcast episode.
Freedom! So fresh, so new. Freedom!